Josh here, and this is my review of Wildstorm's comic adaptation of the Friday the 13th franchise. And to be more specific, this is book 2 of the collecting these stories that they've written for it. Book 1's now out of print, and unfortunately I can't get my hands on it because I loved this graphic novel. It's true that it took me, well, about a half hour to get through every single one of them, and even then I lingered on the artwork. But they were really, really enjoyable, and for fans of the Friday the 13th franchise, it was a lot of fun. I'm going to go through them story by story. There's 4 specific tales, a couple issues for 2 of them, but regardless of the point, 4 specific tales. First one is called Pamela's Tale, and it is probably my least favorite of the collection because it is mostly a recap of the original Friday the 13th. Quite literally, the first few pages offer no new content other than, I guess, the art, which is in itself not very good. It's not that it's bad, but it's just really unremarkable. Even if it's trying to mimic the real-life actors, it actually is a really disturbing job, and not disturbing in like a purposeful way, of crafting Pamela Voorhees' face. Really, really freaky one-page spread when you first see her, when the counselor gets in her car. Just really weird. Anyway. The story does offer a lot of backstory on Pamela, her home life and whatnot. It's kind of overlaid with some wry narration by her. And it's mildly amusing, don't get me wrong, but overall, there wasn't really anything super gory in this. The story wasn't that interesting. It didn't really add that much depth to anything. I imagine it's a decent companion piece to the original movie, but other than that, I really can't recommend this on itself, so I was a little disappointed when starting off, but everything picks up from here on in. The second story, called Abuser and the Abused, is a really short story, actually. It's about 15 pages, if I remember correctly. And while it's really short and the story does seem to be fairly inconsequential, it had really fantastic looking art that kind of reminds me of a mix between Scott Pilgrim and 40s style comic strips. It's really interesting, and though the story really does nothing really happens, it's got some good Jason action, and the art style alone just really blew me away. I can't stress that enough. Not to mention, too, is another separate artist that did the cover for this that's included in the trade paperback version of this comic collection, which is equally fantastic. Really looks like it should be on a metal cover or something, but really great nonetheless. Third story is probably the biggest story in the collection. It's called Badlands, and I don't really want to spoil it, but in short, it tries to parallel one of the Jason tales, people wandering around near Crystal Lake, having their own problems. Jason hunts them down, of course, and tries to parallel that with kind of early explorers coming into North America. And it's really interesting. I'm not really sure what they're exactly trying to say or what that parallel is really supposed to mean. The obvious interpretation seems kind of odd, but regardless, the story had some really, really fantastic art and a very slick looking, some great kill shots, and a pretty decently interesting story, especially so because there is snow, and that sounds really ridiculous to say, but not a lot of horror stories really have actual snow. Most of them are set during the spring or the summer or even the fall, but there's really too few nowadays that I think actually have snow. There's some, don't get me wrong, of course, The Shining, Dreamcatcher, I could go on and on, there's a ton of them, but not as many as the other thing is what I'm saying. So with Badlands, definitely a highlight of it. Takes a little longer to read. It's got a decent story for a Friday the 13th type setup, and it's really, really satisfying. Good payoff. And the last story is actually more of a comedy than anything else, and whether you consider the Friday the 13th franchise a comedy regardless, it focuses on this one kid who is not exactly normal looking, but not terribly deformed. In short, Jason comes along as they're telling a story of Camp Crystal Lake massacres, and Jason comes along and decides not to kill this kid because he sees something in him. I'm really kind of interpretation because Jason never speaks, but Jason sees something in him that kind of reminds him of himself. So the kid kind of tags along with him as Jason goes about his day and whatnot, kills people. Police are trying to hunt him down. This one police officer is all involved. He's on methamphetamine the entire time. He's having this crazy dialogue in it. And the kid, it's really humorous because without spoiling anything, the kid basically sees it as the ultimate summer vacation, that he never has anyone telling him what to do, doesn't have to go to sleep at a certain time. So he sees Jason as like a father figure, and it's really ridiculous, but it doesn't make a whole lot of sense in context, but it really made me laugh a lot. And particularly, there's a few really, really graphic kill shots that made me squirm. One of them, even if it's riffing off New Blood, it really, really worked. And overall, the dialogue was actually really good in this story. Now, all of this in its totality, like I said, is a very short read. The dialogue does kind of waver from story to story. It's generally not bad, though. Abuser and the Abused does have the worst dialogue, and none of it is Shakespeare, don't get me wrong, but it certainly all serves its purpose and serves the tone of each of the separate stories. Overall, like I said, if you're a fan of Friday the 13th, go and pick this up right now if you can find it still in print. Get it while it is, because it's really great. Like I said, I wish I could have seen the first collection. I wonder what they would have done with it then. I really like these kind of different interpretations of Friday the 13th, and I guess if you're not a fan of Friday the 13th, don't pick this up expecting that you're going to be converted. Half the shit really won't even please you that much unless you know the franchise itself, particularly, like I said, that kind of riffs off of New Blood and, among other things, the different sequels in the series. But definitely a great comic. Pick it up. I really enjoyed it.